All right, guys, vlog number 31, part two. So we'll just call it vlog number 32. All right, but it is going to be a part two. All right, sex, shamanism, and soulmates. What the heck do those things have to do with each other? Well, in the first vlog number 31, I spoke to you about sex, sexual energy, and Taoist practices, and how in the Taoist practices, meditation is sex, sex is meditation, it's all energy, it's all related. I also talked to you about the Buddhist teaching that says no one can make you feel anything, which means it's your responsibility to cultivate happy mood. It's your responsibility to cultivate love. It's your responsibility to cultivate chi. It's your responsibility to cultivate your sexual energy, not just put that on your partner or on your lover to get you off or to satisfy you, etc. Learning to cultivate at a higher level takes practice. It also takes education and so on and so forth. I hinted to you for some direction with that. So, how did it begin for me in terms of some of these references to shamanism and attracting my soulmate? What did that look like for me? Well, when I was younger, long before I ever knew about reincarnation, I had visions of Tanya. I had visions of meeting this soulmate, and I had um, fantasies about that, so to speak. And at the time, I didn't really directly know about reincarnation. Like, I hadn't heard the word reincarnation, but I had experiences where I would see people in my life where in their energy field things would start to merge and look different to me. Like, imagine if this Buddhist face just all of a sudden blended with my face and like you couldn't tell the difference almost between the two of us. That would happen with people in my life, and I started having all kinds of visions as well of just walking down the street in China, being in the marketplace, and just sort of like lifetimes of experience of those kinds of things. We'll leave it at that for now. So, being psychic and intuitive on the level that I was, although I didn't have words for that either, but growing up in a Catholic environment and on one side Protestant, on the other side with my dad, somewhat agnostic, even though he was a somewhat practicing Protestant, and then my grandmother on that side, my dad's mom, um, pretty much being atheist, especially toward the later years of her life, where I sort of knew her in growing up, and then my other grandmother, very super Catholic. Anyway, these kinds of ideas that I had running through my head and the visions that I had, they didn't really fit with my family so well. And so I kind of hid them and, as mentioned, would go hide and sort of go off to the forest. So in meeting Tanya, I started asking all kinds of questions. I would write in my journal and I would just go out to the woods and I would ask a question, for example, like, what is her name? Where does she live? How am I going to meet her? So on and so forth. And psychic information is very subtle. Most of the time. It's not like a big, like, booming voice, blah, 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 I'll go here. It's not usually like that. It usually comes in the form of subtle information, subtle images. The subconscious mind speaks in symbol. And so a lot of times, like, a symbol will come, and then you put a few symbols together, and then all of a sudden, like, words can come from that, and a story can come from that. That's one way that information can come and has come for me many times over the years. And so when I started asking questions about where is this soulmate and where is this person and so on and so forth, um, they, I say, the spirits, the guides, etc., would send me images, and I started to put together a puzzle over the years of images of what I thought she looked like. The shaman that I was working with at the time, she very much saw Tanya, who I would eventually come to meet as a um, Native American. And I really saw Tanya in my mind as being Asian, although I thought that perhaps there was some Native American, but I really wasn't leaning, I was leaning more strongly toward the Asian, even though I thought she might have other attributes or other nationalities or races or whatever mixed in. There was a strong connection to that Asian side of things, which of course makes sense years later now, me being a medical Qigong master and her being a acupuncturist, doctor of Oriental medicine, etc., and what we do is for our business and so forth. And why do we fantasize about a soulmate? What's the fantasy about a soulmate? We want to find deep love, we want to find deep connection, we want to find deep communion, um, commitment. We don't want, I don't know, we just don't want something really superficial, surface, nothing, blah, right? So what we're really talking about is we're talking about like deep energy and deep energy connection. So, but for by the time I met Tanya, I mean, I had a stack of journals like yay high. I'd written her letters for many years. And short version of the story, relatively short version of the story because it's a long story, but I'll tell it in its condensed version. So I'm working with a shaman. I start having dreams, and in this dream at night, this nighttime dream, because I had daytime dreams too, but in the night I had this dream of a white wolf that came to me, and I was at a fork in the road, it seemed like, in my life at that time, and I was trying to decide whether I was going to go back to school and study further courses toward chiropractic school or possibly acupuncture school, or if I was, although I was leaning toward chiropractic at the time, or was I going to get a job and go work at a school and work with kids and stuff. Uh, I put some feelers out. Both things came back. I ended up enrolling in classes and I ended up getting this part-time job. When I showed up at the biology class, it turned out that on the front cover there was a white wolf on the cover, and the job that I got was the symbol for their school. It was like a middle school, and the symbol for their school was a white wolf. And the street was on Wolf Pit Road. So all of that was very interesting and very mind-blowing. And at that time, I was having a lot of experiences in working with the natural elements, including animals and power animals and all of that kind of thing, if you're familiar with that kind of reference. And I was literally having like amazing experiences out in the woods. I'd always had really cool experiences in the woods, but they seemed to be intensifying where I was being visited by owls. I was being visited by, larger creatures, whether it was a bear or, many stories there. But for now, okay, just getting very connected with that and having a lot of visions and also at that time in my private practice, which I'd been doing, in working with people, because I started working with people when I was 15 years old. So now I'm like in my 20s, approaching 30, and I'm counseling people and things of that nature, and counseling kids and so on. This is slightly after those couple of jobs I just talked about, and I uh, am having visions, okay, about where to go and what to do, and so as I'm asking spirit and I'm praying and so forth, uh, everybody at school, I was in college at the time at the University of Connecticut, and everybody I was running into was asking me, I just run into a stranger and they'd say, hey, what are you doing? Where are you going? Blah, blah, blah. What are you going to school for? They'd ask me questions. And then I'd say something, and then they'd literally say something straight out of my prayers, and then they'd literally like give me direction. They'd like give me some other piece to the puzzle, right? And so people kept saying to me, Colorado, Colorado, Colorado. You ever been to Colorado? You ever been to Colorado? Ever been to Colorado? And just prior to that, I had been meditating and asking where would I meet Tanya, where would I meet this soulmate? And a vision came to me of a movie that Sylvester Stallone made called Cliffhanger, and it just came into my mind. I don't think I'd even seen the movie at that point, and the name came, and the movie came, and so they said go rent this movie. So I was like, okay. So I went and rented the movie, and right in the beginning of the movie, the first thing it says across the bottom, it says Boulder, Colorado, like filmed in Boulder, Colorado, right? And um, and I see the mountains and everything, and I'm like, wow. And so shortly thereafter, my dad was traveling out to Colorado on business. I was already enrolled in school. I had that job. So my mom said, "Your dad's going out there on business. I think you should go with him." And the signs were so strong, I decided to go. And so I actually dropped out of my classes at the university to go. That's how, because it was literally like finals week or something anyway, and I just like bailed and went to Colorado. So I'm sitting in a booth eating lunch with my dad in Colorado, and I had discovered Boulder. Okay, we went to Denver, which was interesting because later uh, the spiritual teacher that I work with and have been working with for the last 20 something years taught out of a specific hotel in Denver. And I showed up, and that's the first hotel I stayed at in Denver. I eventually ran into that spiritual teacher, and that's a whole nother story. But um, I found Boulder, went down to Boulder, and I was sitting there having lunch, and a woman walked by, and she looked similar to Tanya, and she walked by, and I literally got up out of my seat. I practically ran to the door. Ran outside, and I stood there, and I just watched her walk down Pearl Street Mall and in Boulder, and just looking at her back. She's just walking, and I knew right away, like I kind of felt like this is not her, but like this is a message. Like that's not exactly her, but like she's here. That was like the message, right? And I felt it. So I came back in, I was dumbfounded. I'm just sitting there and I'm like mind blown. And and my dad's like, "What happened?" Anyway, I told him, and anyway, so uh I go back to Connecticut and went through some big changes there and so on. Had some big changes go on. Um, Skip over that for now. And I decided to pack everything and in my car with my Rottweiler and drive cross country to go to Colorado to find Tanya. So drive cross country and again decided I need to move out there. That's where she was, etc. Little did I know I got there 5 years early. She wasn't there yet, but I got there. I started to work on things toward medical school, private practice. Everything kind of grew and continued. But on the soulmate subject, jumping ahead, um, couple to whatever 3 4 years, whatever 5 years, I guess, something like that. It's about 5 years, I think. I decided to do something I'd done many times before. And I said, Tanya, if you're out there, and by the way, I didn't know her name was Tanya. There's an interesting twist with those couple of details too, as far as the name, but I won't go into that right now. I'll save that for another day. But I had a couple, let's just say this. I had a couple of names that were repeating in my dating world, okay? And one of them was Tanya. And I will also say this. Tanya had a repeating theme in her dating world, and one of the names that kept repeating in her dating world was David. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, all right. So there's that detail. Um, so I went out to the sky like I do and like I like to do, and I went out to the sky and I said, "Okay, if you're out there, um, I'm ready for you to show up." You know, um, I was in a relationship at the time, and I was leaving that relationship, and I said, "I'm ready to move on with my life and so on, and I'm ready to meet you. Like, let's just do this. If this is real, I've been focused on this for so many years. Like, let's make this happen." And I told her I'm easy to find because I'm in this spiritual newspaper called Nexus at the time there in Boulder. And I said, my picture's there, the description of my work is there, my phone number is there. Call me, contact me. Well, she did the next day. Like I tried that so many times before, but that time worked. That's called a tipping point, guys. So for any of you that are familiar with my teaching and the teachings out there about this thing called tipping point, that was a tipping point. I asked one more time and bam, I got the magic. She called me the next day and she said, "Hi, My name's Tanya. I'm an acupuncturist from Lakewood, Colorado. I moved here from California a while ago, and I was just wondering if the Nexus newspaper is a good newspaper to advertise in, et cetera, et cetera. And uh, and I started talking to her, and then she's told me a little bit about herself, and of course my radar is going off, you know. And so then I start doing this like reading on her, which is typically what I do. If you're familiar with me and you call me and I do a healing session with you or something, if you've ever had that experience or had that opportunity, you know what I do. I start reading the information, I start reading the energy, I start telling stories, etc. So I started doing that with her, and she's like, "Wow, you're really intuitive, and you have a lot of psychic ability." And she's like, I do too. And so we started to talk about that. And then she's like, well, maybe I should, my birthday's coming up. Maybe I should get a session with you. So anyway, she ended up getting a session with me. And so going back to my shaman that I was working with, she told me, she said, I think she's Native American. I said, I think she's Asian, right? Remember that? So I think I told you that somewhere here along the way. And so she said, this woman's going to come knock on your door. This is what she had told me, some years before, right? So there she is. Tanya comes to knock on my door. And as soon as I saw her, I knew. I mean, at least I thought I knew. Seemed like every part of me knew. Although I had still a question, that one little question mark, like, are you sure? So anyway, so she comes in, I do a session with her, and I had an altar. And on the altar, I literally had a picture of the pamphlet that they sent me that had a plate on it. Somebody painted on a plate this woman's image, and I had decided this is what Tanya looks like. I had all these other hints and clues. I won't go into those too, but I had this one, and I had this picture, and I put it up on my altar. So I didn't actually buy the plate, but I literally have the piece of paper with the plate on it, right? With the picture of the woman that I thought this, until Tanya shows up, this image is going to represent Tanya, and I put it on my altar. So she has this whole session with me. And at the time, I was actually known a little bit more as a psychic and a little bit more as a shaman than I was a medical Qigong master at that time. And so my altar was very shamanic and this and that. There's a wolf on there and so on. Anyway, uh, so she, as she's walking out the door, she looks at the altar. She looks right at that picture, which I hadn't even like registered because I was so focused on her, I forgot about the picture. Anyway, so she looks at the picture and she says, "Oh, um, did I tell you I'm part Native American?" And she said, "You can see it right here in my cheekbones." And she immediately shows me her cheekbones, which is exactly what my shaman did when my shaman was reading, uh, you know, about Tanya. And she said, "You can tell that she's Native American by her cheekbones." And she's showing me, this is what my shaman said, she's showing me that she has raised cheekbones. And if you have never seen my favorite movie called Thunderheart with Val Kilmer back from like the late 80s or something, I highly recommend that movie. It's my favorite movie, and the reason that it's my favorite movie is that all of those things that Val Kilmer went through, as far as like the deeper spiritual transformation, the visions, the experience that he had with the shaman, that's what I went through in my 20s. I literally went through that movie in my 20s, like lived it. Okay, minus there's like a murder scene and some stuff that goes on in there, some drama. I didn't go through any of that. But some of Val Kilmer's visions and everything. Here's this white guy, Caucasian guy on Native American land, and then he comes to be accepted as one of their own, etc. I have gone through those experiences, so this movie has a very close place in my heart. So, Thunderheart. Um, so Tanya looks at the picture and she says, did I tell you, did I tell you that I'm part Native American? You can see it in my cheekbones." I was like, "Oh my God, you gotta be kidding me, right?" So, so very shortly after that, I officially ended this relationship that I was in. I started dating Tanya. As soon as I started dating Tanya, this is a little side piece for those of you that are just interested in the story. But again, being an intuitive and so on, my dog, who I left Colorado, or sorry, Connecticut with to go to Colorado, the Rottweiler that I mentioned, she was like my best friend, like ever, right? And she journeyed with me. I bought her, as again, coming back to the shamanic thing, I bought her for my mom, and she was meant to be like a shamanic protector for my mom because I was going to go away to college and stuff. And anyway, as soon as I brought her home, my mom was like, I can't handle this dog. She loved the idea of having a big dog, but then as soon as it came home and the big dog showed up, she was like, "No, I can't do it." And I could not give her back, so she started sleeping in my armpit until she became too big to sleep in my armpit. And anyway, became my best friend for the next 9 years or so. And I had no idea. I thought Rottweilers lived to be 15, 16, 17 years old, right? And so she's about 8 years old. And she starts whispering to me, if you're going to find this woman that you've been looking for, you need to find her because I'm not going to be around much longer. And I'm thinking, am I making this up? Like I keep hearing the message. She just looks at me, like if you're in touch with your dog looks at you and you're like, "Oh my God, I forgot to feed you," or "Oh my God, you need to go outside." Like you just know, right? Well, she's looking at me going like I'm leaving, right? But she looks perfectly healthy. She looks perfectly fine. I'm going, I must be misreading this, right? So then a woman comes to my front door and she's walking by and I'm on the porch with my dog and she goes, "Oh, is that a Rottweiler?" Yeah, and I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh, she's so beautiful." And then she's like, "Oh, it makes me so sad. Mine just collapsed in my garden, yeah, like last week or something." I'm like, "What?" So then I was like, "Wow, she really keeps telling me this." So then another thing happened like that. Same thing. Person's like, "Oh, is this a Rottweiler?" "Oh, mine just died." I'm like, "Oh my God, like this is like, you know, maybe this is really going to happen." Um, so as soon as I start officially dating Tanya, we literally take my dog out on a walk, and we walked for, I don't know, 3 miles or whatever it was. Had this amazing journey underneath the moonlight and everything. And our first date, like a first, well, I think it was actually our second date, but like anyway, official date or whatever. Anyway, and we're out there. We had this great time and connecting with each other and everything. My dog came back, and we got home, and Tanya went back home that night to her place or whatever, and my dog collapsed on the kitchen floor the next morning. I mean, she just literally came walking through the kitchen floor and boom, collapsed, you know, and I just really didn't expect that. And over the next 2 months, uh, she continued to decline and made her transition. And it was a beautiful thing. And it was interesting because when she was, I had her lying out, near my bedroom on a bed, which is where she was most comfortable. And I'd been sleeping next to her like every night for like 2.5 months and doing healing work on her and trying to help her transition and everything. And she kept telling me, "I don't want you to euthanize me. I want you to do this like naturally or whatever, right?" And so it kept going on and on and on. I got to the point where I was like, "Okay, look, like if you do not part, I'm gonna, take you to the vets and assist you because I'm assisting you as much as I can, and you're not leaving the body and so on, and you're in pain and you can't breathe and so on." And so anyway, it was interesting. So I was like, "Look, I'm like, I can't take it anymore. I need a break from this on the level that I do energetically. So I'm just gonna go lay in my bed for a while, give you a little bit of space. Maybe you need some space from me, etc." And it was interesting. I was laying in bed and I slept there for a couple hours, and all of a sudden I heard her chain. She wore like this collar like around her neck sometimes, and I had it on at that time. And when she laid on the floor, it would like make a sound. So I heard the sound, and I got up and immediately like got up like got to go check on her, and literally I went over and she took her last breath. And the interesting thing is she was not wearing her chain. She didn't have it on at all, actually. So I just heard that sound in my head. It woke me up. And she had a beautiful transition, and we're going to add another element, which really to me is the element of shamanism here, in terms of how this stuff comes together. But those who leave you, and perhaps at another time I'll do another video on this. Well, when someone leaves you, they have the ability to communicate with you, and you have the ability to communicate with them, you know. And there's different ways that happens, but I'll tell you how it happened in this story. So, Tanya, I was pretty devastated by it, actually. It was just a really, is like my grandfather, who was like a very primary father figure in my life, passed away just before that, before I came to Colorado, and that was pretty devastating. And then I lost my dog, who was like my best friend, and so that was a big one for me. So anyway, but now like Tanya was there in my life, and she came right in the middle of all of that, so which was pretty intense for her on the level that it was. But anyway, I get into her car, and she drove me up to the mountains, and there was a song, and it kept going, it was playing in the car, and I kept hearing it in my head, and then I said to her, we came back down, and I said, man, there's this song that I heard on the radio earlier. I'm like, I really want to hear it again. I'm like, I started thinking to myself, I think it's a message from, my dog's name was Shotzi. I said, I think it's a message from Shotzi. And she said, well, what does the song sound like? And I said, I told her what it sounded like, and she goes, oh, that's not the radio, that's my CD. And I was like, really? I'm like, can you put it back on that song? So she puts it back on that song. And the words to the song which came on were, and I forget the band's name that sings this song, but it was, so lately I've been wondering who will be there to take my place when I'm gone. You'll need love to light the shadows on your face. And if a great wave shall fall upon us all, then I hope there's someone out there who will bring me back to you. No joke, okay? And all along she kept saying, you need to find somebody essentially to replace me, blah, blah, blah. And, anyway, on the story goes. And so when we would go out, we'd be eating lunch, or we'd be eating dinner or something, like literally, like there's no music anywhere in the restaurant. And then all of a sudden, like right above my head, like in the speaker, on comes this song. So lately, been wondering. And, so anyway, I'm not going to try and sing with the stuffy nose and everything else here, but, uh, love is more real than fear. Fear is temporary. Love doesn't have to be sad, and it's not even that I'm sad, but it's heart space. Love for those that we love, love for those that we had time to spend time with here, and the connection that we have with them on the other side, and love for the journey, because the journey is temporary. I don't mean that in a like a scary or fearful kind of way. I just mean this is the temporary. The love goes on. The love in my heart is going to go on. The love in me as a light being is going to go on. If my dog chooses to reincarnate, I believe she will. If I choose to reincarnate, I believe I will. But I'm not going to be David again, guys. I'm only David in this life, this time. So sometimes it does make us a little sad when we have a Shotzi and we lose that Shotzi, or we have a grandfather and we lose that grandfather. But our connection with souls goes on and 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 on. And you have many, many soulmates, many soulmates. And you could think of all of these other people as like conflict mates. You have conflict mates and then you have soulmates. And some of your soulmates are lovers. Or if you choose one of your soulmates, the soulmate you are looking for, if you happen to be like me, where you were looking for a very particular soulmate, then your very particular soulmate is your lover, and in this case, also the mother of my daughter, and so on. So, not that I'm afraid to show you any of those emotions, but had to pause there for a moment and get some tissue. And again, heart space, very deep. We have different levels of heart space, but anyway, that's a little bit of my heart space. The healer in me, the softy side of me, as opposed to what you might see me be doing in Taekwondo class or Jiu-Jitsu class. But this is that side of me that is a lover and a healer, and has a profound love for my family and humanity. And those of you that desire to awaken and discover that you are more than the face that you see in the mirror, although you should love the face that you see in the mirror too. And if you want to, I highly recommend it. Um, but there's just so much more to life, and there's so much more to Qigong, and there's so much more to practicing, and there's so much more to your sexuality, and there's so much more to your inner power than the small little tiny box that social consciousness has built. So many people love to say to me that they are informed when they read certain things or learn certain things or whatever about the world. And it's true, but there are many worlds. In other words, the world of a monk and the world of the temples around our planet that are chanting and meditating and praying, they live in a very different world than political leaders. Political leaders live in a very different world, and in general. And people who are playing professional football and they're doing it ongoingly, regularly, and that's their main thing. They're living in a very different world than people who are practicing yoga in general. Not to say that football players can't practice yoga or yoga practitioners can't practice football, but you get the idea, I think. And so, what you focus on, whatever you focus on, you're going to see more of it in your life. It's that simple. And as my parents and other people used to say to me, my mentors when I was growing up, be careful of who you hang out with because you might just become like them. So if these things are meaningful to you and you would like to experience a greater sense of who you are from the inside out, then stick around. If you'd like to learn some internal practices regarding chi and energy and connecting to other people and finding deeper meaning and soul path and soul purpose in your life, then maybe check out my book. Maybe come to a workshop. Maybe learn to become a Qigong teacher. Maybe learn to be a healer for other people. Maybe learn to be a healer for yourself. Um, And if for any reason this is not for you, you probably didn't watch the video this far. So thanks guys for tuning in, and I hope that this is helpful to you. And again, perhaps in the future, you can let me know. I'm sure there's some of you that would like to see it. I will perhaps do a video on communicating and connecting with those who have parted. Take care, guys.